Welcome, everyone, to the Zettelcast. My name is Camden Bucey, and this is my audio journal, conversations that I have with people as well about various topics in intellectual life, productivity, all things that I find interesting. And I have with me my brother, Kipton Bucey, who's calling in from Rockford, Illinois. Welcome, Kip. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Camden. Glad to be here.
Yep. Last time we talked, we were at our parents' house, right? And now we see we're in our respective locations. I'm actually in the office at Reformed Forum using all their equipment, and happy to do so. It's a much nicer setup since I do this for a living. And you, I take it, are in your basement.
In my basement. A little warmer down here than when we were outside.
Oh, goodness.
In the evening.
I don't know, man. My office is pretty cold right now. I think I got it at 68, and it feels like it's at 60. Got to chill. Anyway. Well, today we were hoping to speak about an article. It's kind of a bit old, but still interesting. Kip presented to me this article that came from the Harvard Business Review from the magazine dated January 2001, titled "The Making of a Corporate Athlete." And it's an interesting topic. I read through the article a little while ago, and it's an article that explores the concept of sustained high performance in the corporate world, but it does so by drawing parallels with the training and discipline that's required of elite athletes. So the authors here do something interesting. They argue that traditional management theories have only partially answered what makes some people excel under pressure, while other people don't cut it, while they falter and fail. And they the authors propose a more holistic approach that integrates physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions even. And by focusing on those four aspects, the authors suggest that individuals can achieve higher levels of performance, resilience, and overall well-being. In other words, if you approach your corporate life and your corporate performance with the same principles and practices as a disciplined elite athlete, you'll actually perform better. So tell me why you sent this article over. I know we've talked about it a couple weeks ago, but I'm curious to hear again your thoughts on this and how you were introduced to this article.
This one was intriguing to me because of my undergrad background and kind of my journey through business and where I'm at today. Many of you don't know, I have a sports management degree background in my undergrad and an MBA from Rockford College, now Rockford University. So as I was going through my undergrad and then transitioning into the professional workforce, many folks had a tough time drawing parallels between why am I in aerospace and I have a sports management background. Well, I attribute some of that to this article and some of the parallels that it draws with athletes and the rigorous training and discipline it takes for them to achieve peak performance with excelling in the business world. And so I can't remember who kind of pointed me in the direction of this specific article, but it kind of tied everything together and kind of brought a light bulb aspect to it in understanding on how it means to be successful in the real world in business, while also drawing those same parallels from a peak athlete performer.
Mm-hmm. Remind me, what your sports management degree, was it in the School of Business or is it a different type of degree?
It's actually in the track of the teaching track, physical education teaching track, but has a large concentration within the School of Business. Mm-hmm. So in simple terms, it was half teacher, half business professional.
That's
with my classes.
See, my degree is kind of half and half too. So my degree, business computer systems, was a degree in the business school at Bradley University, but a significant portion of the courses required were computer science and other types of things, database type stuff, when those courses were actually offered through the business school, but it's basically a hybrid degree. So what happened when you graduated, or you're getting close to graduation?
Mhm.
What eventually compelled you to flip over to doing an MBA?
It was really the job market at the time. In 2012, we had the housing crisis in 2008. That was still very much alive and impacted the job market in 2012. And I looked at my undergrad degree, said, yeah, I can go sell tickets at a sports team. At the time, I was working for the Ice Hogs as an assistant equipment manager. And I wanted to continue in the sports industry, but also knew that I needed more than just a sports management background or a master in sports administration. I didn't want to corner myself in just the sports realm.
Hmm.
Wanted some additional options given to me, and I believe the MBA to be the best route. And at the time, there was a graduate assistant position opening up at the college. I did that for about 8 months, and then there was an internship opportunity that was through the school, at the time with UTC Aerospace Systems, now Collins Aerospace, in that the internship while you're going through the MBA program, in hopes that you get fully onboarded after that. So I did the
Yeah.
undergrad for 8 months, and then at about 3-4 months before I then graduated with my MBA, and then I stuck around.
Yeah. You and I have very similar stories, because I went through my undergraduate, and then the economy was not great in 2002 when I was finishing up my undergraduate. Plus, I also was engaged at the time, or almost engaged. I can't remember. I think I was by then. And I had some job prospects in Chicago, or even in Houston, Dallas, I think. I really didn't want to move to Dallas. And I really, really, if I didn't have to, want to necessarily move even to Chicago, 3 hours away from my fiance, now my wife. And so I was kind of mulling this stuff over with my advisor. Oh, I should say I had been an intern at Caterpillar several times, but they had a hiring freeze. They will do this when the economy's not bad. They just have a hire. We're not hiring anyone. It's just across the board.
Mm-hmm.
They just put a freeze on it. It's kind of one of those. I don't know how smart those decisions are, but it's an easy way for them just to cut some costs and
Short-term gain.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't, and I really would like to work for Caterpillar, but I ended up talking to my advisor, whose wife was actually a VP at Cat. But he said, "Well, why don't you just do an assistantship?" And I said, "Well, what is that? I don't even know what that is." He says, "You can go get an MBA, and we'll pay you to get your degree, and you do some work, as a grad assistant. We'll even pay you for that." I said, "You won't live like a king." That's what he said. "You won't live like a king, but we'll pay you to go to school." And I said, "Sign me up." So
Where do I sign?
and then while doing that, I worked as an assistant for the Bradley Center for Business and Economic Research. And while I was doing that job, 20 hours a week, and then taking night classes, doing my MBA, I got word of, Caterpillar, a different department of CAT in a completely different section of CAT than I had worked before, was looking for someone who knew how to program and knew statistics. And my professor, who I was working for, asked a different guy, the guy I was working as a grad assistant for, asked if I knew anyone. And I said, "Well, yeah, me." And so anyway, I ended up taking that job. So I worked 20 hours a week as a grad assistant, 20 hours a week at Caterpillar, and then I went to class at night, which was nuts. But I got through it. I got paid well, and that got me in. You make a longer story somewhat short. It's already long, but I parlayed that. That got me in the door, and eventually I ended up getting a job at Caterpillar through the project I had been working on as an intern. It just turned out to be a really great project, and we did great work. It put me in front of good people who could make a decision. And the Lord really provided for me there. But that's how I got in the door at Caterpillar as a full-time employee. Oddly enough, and then eventually I had my own intern, or at least in my team, we had an intern that's our other brother, Kelly, and he literally worked at the end of my desk. He lived in my attic like a gremlin or something, and then worked at the end of my desk. And then when I left to go to seminary, he got hired on full time and worked for a while till he got
See,
married.
it worked out.
And
The gremlin worked out.
That was great. But so, business computer systems, there's a more general, natural pathway to working in a corporation because every corporation has, computer needs. IT is in every business, every single one. I can't think of a business now in the modern day that doesn't have some aspect of IT. Even if the business is even if you were like an old timey blacksmith, you still probably have a website. Mm-hmm. And even just like to run, an email newsletter or whatever, there's IT component to everything. It's much like every business has accounting and it has finance, all this kind of stuff. But not every business has sports management. But tell me about the but you parlayed that into an MBA, which obviously that has lots of application. But what was your entry level position at Collins? What were you doing as a student, as an intern, and then what was your first job? And why did your personality and your education prepare you for that?
Yeah, great question. And it gets even crazier, I think, as we move along. The whole sports management, getting an internship, I would say that's pretty normal. But it really came down, if you fast forward to execution within a specific function, is really where it came down to in performance. But my first job, I came in as an intern as a training management coordinator. So I was the person that bugged you on your EH&S training, all of the online modules that you take as part of onboarding and recurring training.
I remember getting all those messages.
That guy.
You haven't finished your course on this.
That was Kipton Bucey.
Okay, I got to take my hazardous materials quiz.
My foreign object damage, my electrostatic discharge training. But what that did for me is it got me in front of every single functional manager we had in our area. I had to work with them.
Because you were ratting out their employees?
Not necessarily, sometimes. But each one of the employees had a training plan, right? An onboarding plan, a training plan, and even the most senior level folks had a training plan, whether they were the ones doing the on-the-job training or succession planning. So I sat down with each one of the functional managers and structured and helped to guide them and put in our online management system the training plans for each individual employee. So I had screen time, FaceTime with all of the managers. So when it came time to, there's good and bad to that, right? If you're a performing employee, that's going to help you get a job. If you stink,
everyone knows.
Nobody wants you. Fortunately enough, I think I tricked a lot of different people to think that I was a great employee. So it got me to that next level when it was time for me to graduate with my MBA, and I needed a job because you had to be in school to have that internship. My internship was running out when I graduated. We had an HR professional. Her name was Roz Walker. She pushed me along to be a buyer, be in procurement. There was an opening there. I didn't know what that job really entailed other than they buy parts. And that was my, I'll say, first real gig with Collins Aerospace after my internship, was being in procurement, working with suppliers, problem solving. And I loved that job. Did that for about 5 years. And then after that, I'd proven myself through that role and through many different challenges with supply chain, and got pulled into program management, where I spent a few years there. And that was a real interesting time because I went from uh, a buyer on a specific program to a deputy program manager on that same program. So I went from, and we talked about this in our last podcast,
Mm-hmm.
the individual contributor to more of a leadership type role
Yeah.
on that same program with the same colleagues and different folks. And it worked out great. And, I kind of had my reservations at the time how it was going to work out, how the team would respond. But that was the first time that it happened. The second time was when I moved from a deputy program manager into a program manager, senior program manager role. Had the same thing there. And then recently had the same thing happen when I moved from a senior program manager role into my current role as general manager.
Hmm.
All within the same area, same business unit. All 10 years. It'll be 10 years here in April of 24. And honestly, I can't say that Collins likely would have passed me over with my resume, having sports management, rightly so,
Sure.
many very qualified candidates that are very smart and educated folks. It really was that internship, I think, that got my foot in the door, and I was given an opportunity to prove myself in some of these areas that the making of a corporate athlete kind of instills in how performance relates to sports.
Yeah, it's so important. Internships are so useful for both people because you can get a sense of the corporation as a employee. Is this the kind of place you want to work? But you also learn things, so you can take that knowledge and bring it with you to another job. But for the corporation, there it's an easy way for them to gauge whether someone's a fit and whether they're a good employee. And it's really hard to do that with a resume alone or even references, because the references are going to be good. You hope. If you get a bad reference, that's terrible because someone picked
Pick that
doesn't have any
individual to be on their resume. Yeah.
awareness of themselves, no self-awareness. And even with an interview, there are types of folks that might interview well, but that doesn't mean they're good employees or good for that role. They just know how to do the interview process, and a lot of people don't. So if you do well in an internship, it's pretty much simple. Not simple, but it's a safe bet for the company to bring someone in who's already been performing well as an intern. But backing up to, and this will build in, because I think this making of a corporate athlete isn't necessarily about lateral moves or versatility in that regard, but we're going to get there, I imagine. But I'm curious to Kip, for you to explain, is there a typical pathway into procurement? If you're looking at all the people that have had that position, first off, is it an entry level position? And second off, are they typically, is there a typical degree that people have when they're coming in? Or are they coming in from all sorts of different positions and it's more of like a personality type thing, where you're trying to match the right personalities or characteristics or traits to the job rather than people, know how to do it before they come in?
I
It's
think
not
it's
like
a
accounting is what I should just let you
yeah.
answer the question, but you have these degrees, which, like with computers, IT, accounting, nursing. These are the kinds of jobs where they're university education, but they have a trade element to them. Like you learn a skill and then you shop that skill, you go somewhere that needs that skill and you can do the thing. It's not a trade school, but it's more like that. But there are other types of degrees, and education is much wider than learning skills, general, like specific skills. And sometimes, finding the right fit can be challenging. So anyway, I'll shut up now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I look at the time when I was in procurement, kind of the roster, I'll say. And we had folks that were very seasoned, that were experts in supply chain, and we had entry level
Did
folks.
they start that way though? I guess is what my question is. Did they
Some
come
did, some
in
didn't.
really?
Yeah.
Where did they learn it? At other corporations or in their education or something?
Yeah, so there's a track between, and there's similarities. If you look at supply chain management and operations and materials management, there is a direct correlation between like planners on a shop floor where they're making sure that materials coming in,
Yeah.
PSYOP, all of those types of organizations, and material planning and supply chain. So there's a lot of folks that
Yeah.
kind of bounce back between
You
the
can get
two. They're in
degrees
other
like that in
organizations.
business schools
Right.
too. Yeah, we had an operations management class in my degree. I remember that. I don't know if that was a major you could do, but I could easily see a business school offering like degrees in supply chain management that or specializations in that type of thing. That makes
And
sense.
there's doctorates and master level supply chain management courses out there.
Sure. It's a big
Um,
deal.
of the yeah, it's probably the cornerstone. If you look at any company, especially Collins Aerospace, we are an integrator and an engineering house. So all of our parts we don't make. We buy all of our parts.
Mhm.
And we're only as good as the last part that comes in the door. You need 100% of the parts for that bill of material. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful, and they all have to be right, and they all have to be compliant to the requirements. So you look at, okay, who is very vital in that, and that's supply chain management.
Mhm.
You know, it's easy to look at the organization and try to, put these different puzzle pieces together. If you don't have a solid supply chain management group,
Yeah, it doesn't matter how
you're going to
smart your
fail
engineers
10
are.
out of 10 times in the
You don't
business that
have the
we're in.
materials you need to do the job or produce
You
the
can
product. It
design
doesn't
a
matter.
great widget. You can put it together, without any flaws. You can ship it on time, but without the parts, you can't do anything.
Right.
And so to get back to the initial question, we had a mix, and I think it worked really well because you had probably 3 or 4 people when I started that were very seasoned. They knew the lay of the land. Those folks took the most difficult suppliers, the ones that weren't delivering on time, the ones that had highly engineered products that they were making that weren't a COTS part or consumer off the shelf part, or items or I thought I nicknamed the term. I stole it from somebody. Items that you can't just place and chase. You can't place the PO and then you can't go chase it and try to burn down lead time. Those suppliers and part numbers were typically taken by the more seasoned individuals because you're really a mini program manager, a mini product manager at that point. You have action items that you're getting through. You're coordinating with engineering ops, the supplier. You are the conduit in the voice of Collins Aerospace at the time, and you're really representing the company, and you're committing funds on behalf of the company through the ERP system. And then you look at folks that are, I'll say, newer within their career or newer within supply chain that typically have the easier parts that you buy, the screws, nuts, bolts, washers that you're just placing the
Mhm.
purchase orders so they understand the system, they understand the compliance rules for government and commercial contracts. Um, and so there's really a path from getting to that entry level position within supply chain into a more seasoned level. But where what you don't typically see within supply chain, and right or wrong, there's really nothing to it. You don't typically see folks that come out of supply chain move directly into program management or from program management back to supply chain. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why that is. Typically, if you pick like a supply chain track, you stay in there with operations.
Mm.
Finance typically stays within their track. And I'm not sure why that is, but I think I took a non-conventional route, and I think it was primarily the help of some individuals, higher level managers that saw some potential and got me out of my comfort zone to go explore
Yeah.
other options through program management.
I like this. This is let's continue the sports analogy. So there are two, I'm a big Michigan football fan, and there are two cases of players on the team right now. One of them is really a success case. Mike Sainristil, who was a wide receiver 2 years ago, and they thought, he shows a lot of potential for playing a defensive back. And they flipped him over, said, "Hey, you're mid, you're in the middle part of the depth chart as wide receiver. we need some help over here. We think you have a lot of potential. Why don't you flip over? We can play you at cornerback or nickelback. He's probably the best nickelback in college football right now, and he's going to be playing
Wow.
on Sundays. He had 2 picks last week against Maryland. He's got a bunch of picks and pick sixes this year. He's phenomenal because he's got all those wide receiver skills. When he picks it, he's going to the house, you know. But he's also so fast, and he has that knowledge because he's played both sides of the ball. Another guy is Amorion Walker, who also was a wide receiver. They flipped over to cornerback. That hasn't panned out. He had some injuries earlier this year, and we haven't seen him on the field with the same kind of success. But the analogy is there that by having the knowledge in the different department, or in this case, the other side of the ball, you are bringing something to the new position that other people don't have, and you're strengthened for it. Harbaugh always likes to talk about how he likes his recruits to play other sports, and not everyone guys like that. Like a lot of guys, want their recruits to be focused 100% on football or whatever sport they're recruiting, and to be hyper specialized. But if you have a multidisciplinary athlete who is not only playing football, but maybe playing, European football, soccer, or baseball, or track, or basketball, wrestling, especially, like there are so many things like you bring from wrestling into the offensive or defensive line, they're that you're not going to learn. And by learning all those skills and practicing all of them, being a cross trainer, in many ways brings so much more skill to whatever position you're in. So I imagine your corporation, or I should ask you, do they have some sort of like rotation? I know I recall something vaguely like this at CAT. I've certainly read about things like this when I was in business school and in various journals, that they'll put people on rotations. If you're on like an executive track, you might spend 8 months, in finance learning this. You spend a year over here in operations doing that. At Caterpillar, if you were volunteering for it and you showed a lot of promise or potential, they'd move you around the world. They'd want you to go work in China for a couple of years and then come over and work in, Texas or something, and then work in Arizona. They just bounce you around to all these different divisions, but you're getting a lot of exposure and a lot of experience. It can be tough on a family, but it could be really promising at a big global corporation like that, a Fortune 50, if you want to build your career, there's all the possibilities there from within the same company. You don't have to change employer, or you don't have to fill out new tax forms. You're just you're at the same company.
Yeah, and Collins has that, or then the greater RTX. There's many different programs that they have. Each function typically has their own rotation program. So if you're in the quality realm in that function, you can go to different sites and rotate around. Operations has the same thing. Engineering has the same thing. And they had, and it's kind of changed over the years because we went from United Technologies Aerospace, and then we merged with Raytheon.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this is kind of being consolidated over the last few years, but they have a few different leadership type programs, as you mentioned. I was in one of them. It was a lower level. You had your normal job, but then you had shadow opportunities for 3 to 4 months, where you shadow other organizations, other functions. And on top of that, you had a project element to it within that function. So typically there was a need that needs to be fulfilled. That's a pretty large gap that the function needs closed or mitigated risk. And it was up to this individual when they came in for the shadow opportunity and their time within that specific organization to help develop or a process or to change something apart that's part of it. And I had about 3 of those and did different rotations, and I found it very useful. I have many contacts that I still pull on and utilize today from that organization. where I hit different roadblocks or I need some help, and I remember, hey, I know someone that works over there. I give them a call, and you have those connections, and that's helped me to this day. Just today, I called somebody up that I needed help from, that I met
Yeah.
throughout that program.
Wow.
It's very valuable for an organization to do that. You get cross training. You break down internal silos that typically
Mm-hmm.
get built in large companies and organizations by
Mm-hmm.
very rigid processes, and you help bridge the gap. And when you go to these other sites, you might be within the same business unit, but you're like, hey, why do you have this problem? We solved that over in Rockford,
Right.
or we haven't figured out that like solution yet, but you guys have.
Right.
Like, so we benchmark.
Exactly.
What did you guys do? Can we do the same process? And I mean, there's multiple things that have benefited from benchmarking other sites that you think these other sites are their own little companies and they have their own culture established, but everybody has the same name on their badge.
Yeah. No, that's important. Those are a lot of very useful lessons. Um, let's dive into this article a little bit more. We might pick back up on this, but there are a lot of main points or at least points that I drew out from this. We can speak about sustained high performance. Where the ultimate goal for executives and their employees is to achieve sustained high performance amidst increasing pressure and rapid changes. So then the question is, well, how do you do that? Not just get performance today or tomorrow or next week, but to do it long term. Like if you're burning the candle at both ends, you're going to bed late, getting up early, staying late hours. How long can you make that happen? That's one example. Traditional approaches where conventional management theories really this is again written in 2001, but they suggest that these conventional management theories have only partially succeeded in identifying what enables some individuals to thrive under pressure. But there's a missing piece, they say, or maybe several pieces. So they're looking for a holistic model where the authors propose something that incorporates physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions to improve performance and well-being. And then two more things I'll mention before I pause. Elite athlete, they use an analogy to elite athletes where they draw an analogy between corporate performers and elite athletes, emphasizing the importance of rigorous training and discipline in both fields. And then finally, the aspect of physical energy and physical well-being, which is a fundamental source of energy. And simple things like proper nutrition, sleep, and exercise can make a significant difference. These are not typically things that people talk about. I studied management theories. The Kingston theory of management was something that in graduate school I was tasked with. It was an ongoing long-term project of my advisor, not my advisor, the guy I worked for. And we had to do all sorts of surveys and statistical analysis of all these different theories of management underneath this umbrella of the Kingston theory of management. And to my knowledge, none of them really, spoke specifically about these aspects, even though this article was written while I was in graduate school or just before. It's an interesting thing to think. It's kind of common sense after you hear about it, but most people don't necessarily draw lessons from athletics with reference to their professional, their business, whatever their business is, but their business performance. But just go walk around the office at 1:30 p.m. and you tell me if people could benefit from proper nutrition, sleep, and physical rigor in their approach to work.
I think before I read this article, and it's been a few years, so I was well into Collins Aerospace, and I think performing a lot of these items, not knowing how they are helping me. I think just because I've been around sports for a long time, played college athletics, been around professional athletes and how they kind of conduct their business. That was kind of drilled into my brain on how I should operate in a corporate setting because I didn't know any better. Yeah. So things like routines, being structured, working out. After I got out of college, nobody told me that I needed to go to the gym at 6 a.m. and go follow this plan.
Yeah.
And you don't realize the habits and routines that you have until nobody's telling you to go do it. And you're like, oh man, I don't have to go to the gym today. Nobody's telling me I have to. Nobody's going to get on to
Right.
me. But
Right.
getting back into that mindset while I was working, I felt, man, I feel a whole lot better if I work out in the morning or work out at night, and that stress goes away. And that goes right into the energy management and stress management within the article, to say if we don't give ourselves downtime, and not necessarily downtime, but recharging. And that looks different to many people. It could be reading.
Right.
It could be working out. It could be sitting on a couch
Mhm.
and not having any distractions. Whatever that is that
Sitting in a
gets you
tree.
to recharge is stress management.
Right.
And I found that for me, it's having a routine every day as much as I can, because it's not always achievable. But if I can get back on a routine and I have a structured workout regimen and a schedule that I can stick to, that I do much better under high pressure, high stress environments.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to teach my kids this. I've got this informal program. Erica, my wife, and I call our three sons MITs, MITs, Men in Training. And so they're ticked at me yesterday because I started this thing where I got them out of bed at 6:30 and they had to come to the basement and work out with me. And we did it again this morning. So my oldest is reluctant but does it. My middle son is ticked, and but he doesn't argue with me because he knows better than
Begrudgingly,
that.
he follows.
Yeah, but I could tell he's just trying to hold it together, like he's like gonna have an emotional breakdown. And then my youngest is like, "Yeah, let's do it," So he came down.
He's the
I was on the
enthusiastic learner.
Oh man, he's all about it. He's like, use another Harbaugh phrase. Let's attack each day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. But I woke him up yesterday morning and I said, "Hey, get up." He's like, "Oh, what? What?" I go, "We're going to get up. We're going to work out with your brothers." "Oh, okay." So he gets out of bed and he comes downstairs and he's just attacking it. We're playing music. He's doing pull-ups and like all this stuff, lifting weights and curls. This morning I'm on the bike downstairs and I hear these steps, down the stairs, and he comes in to the basement. He's like, "Yeah," and he's like, gives me a high five. It goes at it. My oldest comes down the stairs, and he's like, "Boom, boom," like comes into the gym like this. And my middle son didn't even show up, so we're gonna have to work out tonight when I get home. Why do I mention this? Well, I'm not trying to just be annoying to them or exacerbate my children to make them upset, and I want to ease them into this type stuff. But part of the problem is my wife always has to get on their case to do all this stuff, like get up. Has to hound them. It's
Yeah.
like she
Yep.
doesn't need to be spending time doing this or remind them it's time to get your clothes on. It's time to get in the van to go to school. Like all this stuff. Why does she have to do all that? They need to grow up and do this stuff on their own. So I'm trying to potentially automate and develop like a whole house, like alarm/bell system. And part of this is going to be physical workout in the morning. And then the bell's or a warning's going to go off, and then the buzzer's going to go, and then they have to move to have their breakfast, and then eventually move to, brush their teeth, get
This is
dressed, all
Busey's
this
boot
stuff.
camp.
Yeah, man, it's going to be like a military camp. But give them that discipline where they can start the day, even if it's 10 minutes of moderate activity. None of this stuff is really that hard. But I presume it's a mindset.
It's a
exactly.
mindset.
And that's what I was telling them, because my son, who didn't like to work out in the morning, is also really like, "I can't do this," when he's doing his homework. And he knows how to do it. It's psychological. And so I'm trying to teach him, and I even explained that to him. I said, "Son, I'm trying to teach you how to get up when you don't want to. I go run every morning. I don't want to get out of bed and run every morning. But there's something I don't want even more than that. And that's the feeling of being sluggish and like a loser
Agreed.
and feeling slow and guilty. Like I hate that worse than getting
Yeah.
out of bed in the morning
Right.
and going and running in the cold and rain and whatever. And then after I finish running, I feel great. So part of it is don't negotiate with yourself. Have the discipline to prepare in advance so you're going to bed early enough. But then when the bell rings in the morning, answer that bell. That's the boxing metaphor. The bell rings. If you don't answer the bell, you lose. The bell rings. You got to get off your stool and be in the middle of that ring. And in the morning, the discipline that it takes to get out of bed, a warm bed, and go out in the cold and do something hard is the same
Mm-hmm.
type of discipline that it takes to do your homework when you don't want to, or to struggle through learning something new, or to make a sales call that's really going to be uncomfortable, or to have a conversation with your boss about some changes you want to see made, or to lay someone off that needs to go. Like there's all these difficult things that we don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're living a life of discipline and attacking things with enthusiasm and preparing for the future and being willing to do the hard thing, that's something an athlete understands. And
And
that's something that translates to the corporate world.
if you're not getting out of bed and working out or whatever you have going on, your competition is.
Yeah.
And for every day
Yeah.
that you don't get out of bed and you negotiate with yourself, be like, one day is not gonna hurt. I'll work
Right.
out 3 days and not 5. I'll be okay. I'm not gonna get fat next week. You know who
Let
is
me
working out?
here.
Your competition
Yeah.
5, 7
Everyone
days a
else.
week. And if you keep doing that week over week, those 2 or 3 days now are months when you're down the line. And then you look back and you say, was it really that hard? I really should have gone and work out more, or I should have
Yeah.
put the time in with my employees because they deserve it.
Yeah. And all those little things compound. Can you imagine any Olympic gold medal athlete or just any Olympic athlete, once you get to that level, do you think any one of them asks this question? What is the minimum I need to do to win the gold medal?
No.
What's the baseline I need to do to win the gold? Nobody thinks that way.
Bare minimum. What's the bare
They
minimum
they
I need to
all
achieve?
think of what can I do right now to put myself in the best position to win. It's a
Yeah.
maximalist mindset, not a minimalist
Yeah.
mindset.
I think everybody should have that mindset as they go through life. I mean, it's not just an elite athlete, and someone might be listening to say, "Well, I'm not an Olympic gymnast, so I don't need to think
No.
that way."
So what?
But you do.
Yeah.
Regardless of, I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy, but as I go through the house, I look for ways, if I'm doing chores or doing other things, I look for ways to optimize how I do things, in what order.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm making coffee, do I fill the water first, or do I grind the beans first? Which one is going to get me to the end goal faster? And I think that's just how my brain is wired with how to
Sure.
optimize, and it probably drives Kayla and everybody else nuts. But
Mm-hmm.
I that's just how I'm wired, and that's how I think. And I think that regardless of if I'm at work sitting at a cubicle in my office, or if I'm driving down the road trying to figure out how I can get somewhere the fastest route, how I can get around
Mm-hmm.
somebody, they're too slow in the left lane, I need to move this way, that way. That's everybody should, I think, to succeed and get and achieve the goals that you have for you, you should have high standards for yourself. But on the flip side,
Yeah.
they need to be smart goals. They need to be measurable. They need to be achievable. They need to be time based, and
Yeah,
they need to be realistic.
Right. Sure. Stretch, but realistic. I agree with all that. That's important. So I think, we're probably using this article as a springboard for some other ideas. Nevertheless, the article is useful, and it's one of those in the academics would say this is a generative article, which just means we get other ideas as we're engaging with this. which is useful. So it's written by Jim Lohr, Loehr, and Tony Schwartz, to give the German spin on it. The Making of a Corporate Athlete, the Harvard Business Review. I'll try to include a link to the article in the episode description. If you read too many of them at the HBR and you don't have a subscription, they're going to block you out. But if you just pop up there,
Incognito mode.
You should just be able. It's telling me right now I have one free article left this month. But it's good. The Making of a Corporate Athlete. Take a look at it online. Any other comments? Final remarks, Kip?
I think we've covered it. A lot of great examples. I think a lot of useful, practical ideas. Looking forward to doing this some more.
Yeah, me too. This again is Zettelcast and my little audio journal, but I have some notes and various things that I've included into my Zettelcasting system as a result of having read this article. So thanks for the suggestion, Kip, for the launch pad for a fruitful and interesting conversation. We'll pick back up on this. I know Kelly's got, or their brother's got some ideas of some things he wants to talk about, and just did a theological interview for the Christ the Center podcast yesterday with a guy who is actually using Obsidian for his theological note-taking. He's the only other theologian who's using Obsidian of whom I'm aware, and he's also that's the software I use to take my notes. It manages my Zettelcasting system. And he also takes the first class period for his theological students to teach them. He doesn't make them use his software or method, but he takes the time to teach it to them. So maybe we'll have a follow-up with him and have some more conversations on the subject. If you have any questions or comments, head on over to the website, my website, camden.bucey.org. We also have, I believe, a voicemail feature for this podcast where you can submit an audio message. And if it's worthwhile, and certainly if it's something I would like to respond to on the podcast, we'll include that audio in a future episode. But I do want to thank everybody for listening, and for this episode for watching as we recorded a video. We'll catch you next time on the Zettelcast.